The Atlantic Ocean did not care who traveled across it. Steel plates groaned as the transport ship pushed westward, its engines producing a steady vibration that passed through the hull and into the bones of everyone aboard. The sound was not aggressive, not hurried. It was confident. Mile after mile vanished behind the vessel, erasing Europe with each slow turn of the propellers. Cold mist settled over the deck like a thin veil. Salt-coated railings and uniforms alike. The wind carried the sharp tang of iron, oil, and rain, an industrial smell that hinted at land far ahead. For the men standing silently along the rail, that land represented contradiction. Among them was General Karl Heinrich Vogler. At 52, Vogler had once issued orders that reshaped battlefields. Entire regiments had moved at his command. Maps had bent beneath his pencil. Now, he stood with his hands clasped behind his back, wearing a prisoner's coat, surrounded by other high-ranking officers who shared the same sudden irrelevance. They were German generals without armies. Only weeks earlier, many of them had still believed the war could be bent back into Germany's favor. Now they were cargo, 60 senior officers transported under guard toward a country they had been taught to despise. Conversation with the crew was forbidden. Still, rumors traveled easily among prisoners. "They're collapsing," one officer whispered. "Their cities are burning," said another. "They need us alive for propaganda," a third insisted. "America is loud but hollow." The words were familiar. For years, such claims had poured from radios, newspapers, and official briefings. The Reich had painted the United States as decadent, chaotic, soft, a civilization built on excess rather than discipline. Vogler had repeated those ideas himself. But repetition is fragile when no one is watching. As night passed into morning, a change in the ship's motion signaled approach. The engines slowed. Fog thickened. Somewhere ahead, land waited. The order came shortly after dawn, all prisoners to the upper deck. Guards moved efficiently, boots striking metal in sharp rhythm. The ship entered a gray corridor of mist. Visibility shrank to nothing. Then, gradually, the fog thinned. What emerged was not destruction. It was movement. New York Harbor revealed itself in layers. First, the water, busy with ferries cutting precise paths. Then cranes, massive silhouettes lifting cargo with methodical ease. Barges followed invisible routes beneath bridges that glowed softly in the early sunlight. And behind it all rose the city. Not broken. Not wounded. Not exhausted. The skyline stood tall and orderly, its towers catching the light as if untouched by the war consuming the rest of the world. The deck fell silent. Vogler stared, blinking against the sting of salt in his eyes. This was not the America he had been taught to expect. There were no ruins. No fires. No signs of desperation. Someone near him muttered, "It must be an illusion." No one answered. Even the guards seemed affected. Their posture remained firm, but their voices dropped. The harbor had a way of humbling everyone equally. Then came the smell. Oil. Hot metal. Fresh coffee drifting from warehouses along the shore. Somewhere nearby, bread was baking. The scent carried warmth, routine, abundance. It struck Vogler with unexpected force. In Berlin, the air had smelled of dust and burned stone. Here, it smelled of production. As the ship passed the Statue of Liberty, the sun caught her torch, turning dull green into warm gold. A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the prisoners. One officer raised his hand in a half-mocking salute, unable to decide whether he was amused or unsettled. "She's still standing," someone whispered in German. The ship docked without ceremony. There were no crowds. No banners. No shouts of victory. Cargo operations continued as if nothing remarkable had occurred. Cranes swung overhead. Clerks checked manifests. Dock workers shouted measurements and times. The absence of celebration disturbed the prisoners more than hostility would have. An American colonel approached. He removed his cap, nodded once, and spoke calmly. "Welcome to the United States, gentlemen." The translator repeated the words. Welcome. For a brief moment, reality felt suspended. Vogler stepped onto the dock. The ground vibrated faintly beneath his boots, responding to the movement of machines all around him. Trucks rolled past in steady lines. Fuel tanks stood stacked with precision. Crates bore factory names he had never seen before. Nothing here felt improvised. The convoy moved through the city. German generals sat on wooden benches in open trucks, gripping the sides as skyscrapers rose around them like walls of stone and glass. Every window reflected light. Laundry hung from high apartments. Radios played somewhere above. Life continued. No German city looked like this anymore. Some whispered that the scene must be staged. Yet mile after mile erased that excuse. Shops overflowed with goods. Streets were clean. People crossed intersections without urgency or fear. At the rail station, they were loaded into passenger cars, upholstered seats, clean windows, space to breathe. Guards offered coffee. Not as a gesture of dominance, but habit. The comfort unsettled them. The train headed south. Steel and smoke gave way to farmland. Fields stretched in neat patterns. Towns appeared orderly and alive. Children waved as the locomotive thundered past. No one shouted insults. When one general asked whether American cities had been bombed, the escort hesitated. "No," he said finally. "They never reached us." The statement landed harder than any insult. At Fort Hunt, captivity revealed another surprise. There were no cages. No shouting guards. The camp resembled a modest campus. Low buildings beneath trees, clean bedding, running water. Meals arrived on time. Orders were given once and followed without force. Discipline existed, but it did not rely on fear. American intelligence had practical reasons for bringing high-ranking prisoners here: distance from revenge, access to information, long-term stability. Yet an unintended experiment began unfolding. These men, raised on hierarchy and control, found themselves living inside a system that functioned smoothly without constant intimidation. At night, they heard trains moving freight across the country. Church bells rang. Laughter drifted from nearby towns. These were not the sounds of decay. They were the sounds of confidence. Interrogations became conversations. Lectures replaced threats. Young American officers spoke openly, critically, without reverence or hostility. One afternoon, a logistics officer asked Vogler to diagram German supply routes. They stood side by side at the same board, analyzing failures honestly. No slogans. No theater. Only competence. That assumption of equality cracked something deep. Transfers followed, to camps across the country. Each move revealed more evidence of abundance. Shops full. Roads maintained. Agriculture organized with precision. Guards loaned books. One offered essays on self-reliance and said, "You might find this interesting." They read late into the night. When winter arrived, decorations were modest. Meals were shared. Small gifts were distributed: paper, cigarettes, a simple card-reading piece. It did not feel calculated. That disturbed them most. Gradually, posture softened. Pride gave way to reflection. Music replaced marching songs. Beethoven echoed through barracks, not as a symbol of nation, but of shared humanity. Letters from Germany arrived describing hunger and ruin. Guilt spread quietly. They were being fed better by their captors than by the homeland they had served. "Perhaps," one general said softly, "the difference is moral, not material." Discussions turned philosophical. Accountability. Law. Consent. "We answered upward," Vogler admitted once. "You answered to each other. That's the difference," an American replied. Between fear and trust. By 1946, repatriation lists appeared. Home meant devastation. America had become the clearest image of what order could look like without tyranny. Before leaving, a small group visited a nearby town. There was no spectacle. Shopkeepers nodded. A child offered gum. An engineer proudly explained a grain elevator that fed millions. "They build monuments to sustenance," Vogler whispered. "And we build monuments to power." came the